Hello guys, it's me Urahara, and in this video I'll show you my list of the 8 strongest Sternritter in Bleach. And I based my ranking on 3 criteria: the strength of the Sternritter without the ability of the Schrift, and his strength with the Schrift ability, and finally his achievements on the battlefield. So let's start guys. And the beginning will be with Buzzfeed. I consider Buzzfeed one of the most powerful Sternritter who didn't belong to the elite guard. And since his first appearance, Buzzfeed has shown his brutal strength. Buzzfeed was the one responsible for this serious injury to Kira, so that with one blow he removed a large part of his chest. And in one of my favorite scenes, he stuck the faces of 2 officers in the ground, causing them to be killed instantly. And this was without using any of his Schrift abilities. But when Buzzfeed uses his Schrift ability, the Heat, we will be talking about another level of strength. Just imagine that if it wasn't for Buzzfeed, both Ace Note and Nanana would have been burned to death. In this scene we saw Buzzfeed and Ace Note and Nanana attack Yamamoto, and the latter used the Ryujin Jakka to push them back. The explosion was huge, as you can see, and we saw how the 3 were burned alive, or so it seemed. But according to Buzzfeed, we learned that the latter saved himself and the rest by using his fire that extinguished the fires of the Ryujin Jakka, and Buzzfeed was about to kill Toshiro with the use of his fire if it hadn't been for the intervention of the Bakakangdo, or when he attacked both Renji and Rokia using his 4 fingers. Notice the extent of the destruction he caused. As for Buzzfeed's fight with Hajvald, it was a dramatic fight that serves the story more than a fight that showcases the strength of both. Buzzfeed in the end remains one of the most prominent Sternritter that Kobo focused on, unlike many. And we move to the 7th place with one of the underrated Sternritter by the fans, Lloyd. This is a legend for me, and do you know why? Simply because he was one of the few Sternritter who showed such mighty strength without relying on Schrift abilities. Lloyd only took the appearance and personality of Urahara and relied on his strength to defeat Zaraki. And we noticed this terrifying scene, how he made him hanging in his hands. And secondly, and this is the most important, the good level that Lloyd showed in front of Yamamoto, whether when he fought him in Shikai or Bankai. We noticed how Lloyd was blocking the attacks of the Ryujin Jakka using only his arms, and when he stood in front of the old man with the Bankai, I consider just being standing in front of that infernal Ryatsu is an achievement. Lloyd showed that he possessed one of the strongest Bleach Vein, which enabled him to resist the heat of Zanka no Tachi. Plus, Lloyd used one of the most powerful Quincy techniques. Unfortunately, as I said in a previous video, I would have liked to see Lloyd's fight against Zaraki after revealing his powers as a second round of their battle.
あんた、致命的だぜ。免疫獲得済みだぜ。
And we move to the 6th place with my favorite Sternritter, Askin Naklova. Askin is one of the few characters within the Quincy that we saw how Kobo focused on from several aspects and showed us the extent of this character's distinction in several important situations, such as his wonderful intervention to stop that dispute that would have developed into a fight between Buzzfeed and Hajvald. And it suffices that Askin is the one who told us about the identity of the 5 special weapons, and about the elite guards and what they represent, and other wonderful situations that highlighted the extent of Askin's distinction from other Sternritter. And to talk about Askin's strength, we can only talk about the lethality of his Schrift ability, the death dealing. Manipulating the lethal laws of any substance is one of the most dangerous abilities that we have seen in the story. It is enough that because of it, Askin dropped out several characters, including the hero of the story, Ichigo Kurosaki, as well as Yorichi, while Kisuke Urahara had to use Grimi to eliminate him, even if this would have cost their lives. Without forgetting that among the elite guards, he was the only one who remained stood in front of Nimaya after the latter defeated all the other elite guards, and without Cringe's intervention, Nimaya would have been among the dead due to blood poisoning. And let's not forget that Askin in the Volt standing mode, his Schrift ability becomes in another level of strength. That's why I consider Askin one of the strongest Quincy characters who made good use of his Schrift ability to defeat several characters. And now we go to the 5th place. Almost all of the remaining 5 are distinguished from the rest of the Sternritter because they possess qualitative and extraordinary abilities. Among them is the Sternritter Bennida, and as described by Askin, he is a Sternritter who already possessed his strength. This is because he represents the Soul King's left hand, and therefore giving him the Schrift by Urahara was only to match his basic strength, which is progress. But in general, Bennida's strength proved its danger, his ability to manipulate the nerves of others by checking his own outside his body. We notice how easily crushed the arms of Yorichi, Zaraki and even Mayuri. In addition to that, he can manipulate literally everything, even objects. We saw how he was manipulating the buildings and destroying the tree that was formed by Hikofune, without talking about his ability to make several copies of him. So even Mayuri, with all his science and the techniques available to him, he found it difficult to fight Bennida, especially since the latter possesses one of the terrifying abilities, which is that by contacting him with the nerves of others, he can steal their abilities. He acquired Zaraki's accent and was gradually reaching his strength level, and also he used Mayuri's new Bankai to breed. But in the end, the thing that made Bennida defeated is his ability to use the same abilities of others, as he choked Nemo's ability of infinite reproduction by feeding on her organs, something that self-detonated him. And if he was able to devour her brain, he would have avoided that fatal mistake, knowing that Nemo's brain was the one controlling the degree of reproduction. But in general, when we talk about Bennida, we are not talking about any Sternritter, but we talk about the Soul King's left hand that considered itself Quincy.
かかっておいでよ。指一本だって使わない。
And the 4th place with the boy Grimi. The ability to make anything you imagine a reality, perhaps it is a dream of each one of us. But when this ability is given to a conceited boy like Grimi, it will surely become terrifying, especially when you contemplate his character and you find that he is someone who loves to manipulate others by imagining unusual things. And because of his ability, everyone was afraid to even approach him. According to the novel, Lil Tito was the only one who close to him. But in my personal opinion, the problem with Grimi's strength ability is that Kobo did not explain it in a logical way, but rather he gave us the general definition that each one of us has. Turning everything you imagine into reality is a good thing, but what is the limit of that ability? Is he capable of turning everything, literally everything, into reality? Through the fight of Zaraki, it was revealed and it was clear that Grimi's ability had limits, but it would have been better for Kobo to have set some conditions so that we know exactly how this terrifying ability works. Because if the ability is truly absolute, then it is essential for Grimi to imagine that Zaraki is dead and the fight ends, or he imagines that he will defeat Zaraki by making him disappear from existence, etc. I mean, there are thousands of possibilities to get Zaraki killed if the ability of imagination is truly obsolete, but it is clear that the ability is related to the extent of Grimi's Ryatsu, to turn the things that he imagines into reality. So Grimi's strength is undoubtedly great and strong. The boy created from his imagination 2 Sternritter, and they are Charles Domino and Gwenel, and he imagined a large meteor that would have destroyed large part of the city if it hadn't been for the intervention of Zaraki. And it is true that this latter was fighting Grimi with an eye patch, but also we must not forget that Zaraki, after training with Yachiro, is not Zaraki before the training. The level of strength became very big. So what Grimi presented is something good and proves how strong he is, because I'm wondering who are the other characters who will be able to withstand all these fantasies he created. Certainly few characters, and they must be at high level of strength to avoid the influence of imagination on them.
生かせると思うか。ならばせめて命を捨てろ。
And the 3rd place, Hajvald, Urahara's successor and his other half. Unfortunately, we could have seen a lot of Hajvald as a power and many fights, but that didn't happen. And despite that, from the beginning Hajvald was known as the second person after Urahara by leading the Sternritter, who were all in agreement that Hajvald is the person who deserves to be the successor to Urahara and no one else. And this is mainly due to his leadership personality, but also to his miraculous power, as as he appeared in the flashback, it appeared that since his childhood, Hajvald had a great strength, to the extent that those with him benefit from his strength, and most prominent example was Busby, who grew in strength and power because of Hajvald. And the most remarkable scene that shows the greatness of Hajvald's strength is when Urahara came to him. Everyone who was in the yard fell on the ground from the excessive riazzo emitted by Urahara, while the only person who remained standing without any feeling of distress or submission was Hajvald. And he is also distinguished by the ability of a strong schrift, which is the balance. And this ability in itself resolves many battles for Hajvald without the need for any significant effort, only by redistributing the bad luck that may befall him to his shield or reversing the good luck that affects his opponent with a bad luck. And Hajvald's skills as a Quincy are at their highest levels. We notice how he killed the officer of the 13th Division before he even approached him, or how he easily broke the Tensa Zangets, and also catching Kangdo, who possessed a body of iron, and yet it did not benefit him against the ability of the balance. Hajvald's ability reached its strongest level by blocking and eliminating Yuryu's ability, the antithesis. On the top of all of this, Hajvald is the only person who was able to use the power of the Almighty by borrowing it when Urahara is asleep. And it is true we don't know whether Hajvald can use the full capabilities of the Almighty or just see the future, but absorbing that ability by itself shows how strong he is. Another thing I have forgotten is the power of Hajvald's Blodgvin. We notice how Lloyd, when he was fighting the old man with the Bankai, he said that if it wasn't for the Blodgvin, he would have been burned alive, while we notice how Hajvald was standing watching that mighty riazzo forming in front of him in the form of fire. Unfortunately, I was hoping to see a real fight for Hajvald, and I mean a fight against the Shinigami. The opportunity was right to see a fight between Kyoraku and Hajvald, but that it didn't happen.
行くぞ。一列に並んできてくれるかな。
And now we're going to the second place, Elite Guard's leader and the first Quincy to be given a schrift by Urahara, Lilibaro. Of course, when we talk about the Elite Guard's members, except Askin, everyone may agree that the balance of power after the use of Urahara for Ausvern has titled to their favor, but Lilibaro's words say that the case is not as some imagine. It was just a question of a bad timing. Nimaya attacked them before they could use their schrift, and this was evident, especially with Gerard and Lily. It became almost impossible to defeat them. Lilibaro, with the ability of his schrift that enables him to penetrate everything, was able to take down the trio of Nimaya, Hikofoni and Kurenji with one shot. But when he opens his eyes 3 times, the opponent will be literally in a very difficult position, because Lilibaro's body becomes intangible and any physical attacks become useless, as happened with Kyoraku when he attacked him with Shikai. As for the release of Lily's full standing, honestly, I hated those strange transformations in terms of design, but as our abilities, they are terrifying. For example, like how Lilibaro can move. The way he moves, it goes beyond the Shinpo concept of the Shinigami, or Hirinkyaku of Quincy, or Sonido of Arankara. Lilibaro uses the teleportation. Kyoraku tried to hide in one of the buildings, and seconds later he found Lilibaro in front of him, and even when Kyoraku used the Kido, it didn't work against him, and in the end Kyoraku used the Bankai. However, also Kyoraku's Bankai wasn't able to take Lilibaro down, because the level of strength no longer respected the well-known normal standards by which a Shinigami could fight an enemy, because most of Lilibaro's abilities were linked to divine powers, miraculous powers. Ohana's words were clear: as long as Lilibaro escaped from Karamatsu Shinju, there is no longer any way to beat him, especially since Lilibaro is like Gerard. After every strong attack, he gets stronger and changes his shape. The level of Lilibaro's strength in the last form, as if we were talking about a character coming from Greek mythology. With his attack, he was destroying buildings and cities in a terrifying way, and therefore it should have been a pre-planning to defeat him by the intervention of one of the characters who have weight in the story, not fabricating a story without pre-construction in order to say that there has been a sacred sword since ancient times and that Nanao is from that family that carries that sword that is mainly directed against God. I mean, mean, as if the Hakyokan sword and all the plot that formed around it was only to justify the use of the sword against Lilibaro and then becomes useless. And now we move to the strongest Sternritter, Gerard the Miracle. Gerard can be said to have 10 out of 10 in terms of achievements and probably the only Quincy to have huge victories against strong Shinigami. Gerard's strength, it can be said, it's mainly due to two important things. The first one and the most important is that he possesses the heart of the Soul King, unlike Bennida, who represented the entirety of the Soul King's left hand, but Gerard was granted the Soul King's heart, and I'm still wonder how Urahara got the Soul King's heart in the first place. On the other hand, in my opinion, it can be said that the Soul King's heart is one of the most strongest, if not the strongest organs we have seen. And this makes sense because the heart is the basis of life. And so, when Gerard received his Schrift, it was enough to make his ability increase whenever he was seriously injured. And this leads us to talk about the second part of his strength, the ability of the Schrift, the miracle, because it is well known that we use the term miracle for someone who survived a fatal incident. I mean an incident that was really fatal and there was zero chance to get alive, but a miracle happened and made that person to survive. This is what happened with Gerard, but in a more miraculous way. When he gets a fatal injury, he increases in size and strength, and in every transformation he uses several techniques such as the Sword of Hope, and by that sword he was able to defeat Zaraki, who was using his Shikai at its full power. And as we saw, nothing worked against him, whether Zaraki in his Bankai mode or the attacks of Toshiro in his adult form or even the attack of Byakuya. The only person who was able to defeat Gerard was Urahara himself, and some may not like the exaggeration of the strength of the elite guard in this way, but in my opinion the problem was not in exaggerating their power, but rather is not building logical counter forces without resorting to inventing ready-made scenarios in order to defeat that specific character. And we saw that in the fight of Lilibaro against Kyoraku when I now defeated him. So guys, this is the end of my video. I hope you liked my list. Tell me your list in the comments and see you guys in another video.